Welcome to Inclusive Conversations, Empowering Voices, a program celebrating and promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion, produced by the NSERC Create programs TABES and Smart Art in association with the Lausanne School of Engineering at York University. I'm your host, Tim Hampton. Today's guests are Julia Bava and Angela Huang. Julia is a graduate of the Honors Biology program at York University, where she is currently completing her Master of Science in the Department of Biology. Angela is a graduate of Bachelor's in Materials Science and Engineering at McMaster and currently pursuing a Master of Applied Science in Mechanical Engineering at York University. Today we are going to discuss the work they are doing in the NSERC Create programs and the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Julia and Angela, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. So I'll start with Angela. Angela, can you describe your academic journey so far?
Where should I start from?
Well, what got you interested in the field that you're in?
Sure. When I was first applying for university programs, I was debating between some humanities programs and the engineering program. So I ended up getting into English at U of T and also engineering at McMaster. And it was kind of like, oh, which one do I do? Like, do I want to, study literature for the rest of my life, or do I want to go into engineering? And then I ended up choosing engineering just because I felt like it was something I would be more interested in long term. So then I went to McMaster, and there I studied material science. And I didn't really get into the flow of things until maybe around my third or fourth year. Coincidentally, during COVID, that was when the classes got more specialized. Because I feel like the very first 2 years of engineering are more general engineering, and you don't really study the intricacies of the field you want to go into. And then after that, I thought, well, it's a material science degree, but and technically I have a degree in engineering, but I don't really know so much of what you would consider to be traditional engineering, like engineering basics. So I decided, why not round it out and then do a master's in mechanical engineering at York University. So I kind of get like both sides of the picture, one of how to make the materials that things are made out of, and then my second degree would be putting it all together. At least that's how I think of it in my mind.
Amazing. What a mixture. So, Angela, let's talk about Smart Art. What is it and how did you get involved?
Well, when I first joined York University, my master's supervisor, Professor George Zhu, was like, well, I am part of the Create Smart Art program, and as are all of my graduate students, and I would love if you could join it as well. I believe it is, if the professor is part of it, then their graduate students may join as well. So then I became part of it because of that.
That's great. So I'll turn to Julia. Hi, Julia. What is your field of study and how did you choose it?
So I am in my Master's of Science in Biology. I've kind of always loved science as long as I can remember. As a kid, I've kind of had that innate sense of curiosity, and that never really went away. I guess, doing scientists in the school and experiments in the classroom kind of just always gives you that passion for knowledge and learning. I guess biology was always the one that I took the most interest in. Kind of seeing life happen all around you has always been something that's caught my attention. So I studied biology for my undergrad at York, and similar to Angela, it wasn't until, third or fourth year that you really start getting these pivotal experiences that kind of shape that kind of career you want to have. In my case, it was second year where I took a plant biology course and an ecology course. And those two courses were really the ones that made me realize that it was the environment. That's what I was passionate about, how everything was interconnected and what we can do to protect the environment. So throughout my undergrad, I took something called a research practicum, which is where you volunteer with a professor. It's 0 credits, but it's just volunteer experience in the lab. And it was similar to Angela again in the respect that it was during COVID. There was a lot of online transitioning to do. So luckily my supervisor, Dr. Baisley, she was kind of ahead of the curve. So it was pretty easy for us to jump into online research. I know there weren't really a lot of opportunities to even do research at that time because so many things were closed. But we managed to do a lot of things, focus on a lot of soft skills as well as technical skills online. So then from there, I also wrote and defended an undergraduate honors thesis. So I kind of always had this passion for biology that's continued. So then I wanted to continue on into my master's with Dr. Baisley, my current supervisor. And that's kind of how I got involved with the TABES program, because she was very familiar with it. And she said, this really aligns with your interests, your research interests, environmental sustainability, public health, and things like that. So it was just kind of a perfect fit for me to join TABES.
And what is your involvement in TABES? Are you doing research, or what kind of research are you doing?
So TABES is training in applied biotechnology for environmental sustainability, and it's an industrial stream Ensor create, and it's a training program to prepare you for a career in the bioindustry sector. And it focuses a lot on, like I said, environmental sustainability, the circular economy. In my case, my research is focused on environmental finance tools, which is not really what I was expecting to kind of investigate through my undergrad. But it was a really interesting opportunity that came up. The conservation impact bond, that's what I'm currently studying.
Thank you, Julia. And so, Angela, let me turn to you. What is a capstone project, and what is your capstone project?
Okay. This is, I guess, similar to you, Julia. It's also like our equivalent of an undergrad thesis. It's done during the last year of your engineering degree for your bachelor's degree. And you typically work in teams of between 2 to sometimes even, I know someone who did it in a team of 8, which sounds kind of crazy, but it depends on the scope of the project and like how much work needs to be done. But I did it in a team of 4, and they were all like great people, and everyone like was amazing in the project. Our capstone project was on the development of a bioresorbable vascular stent for your heart. So we had to decide for like a combination of materials for a stent. A stent, I'm going to go back, is sort of like a cylinder that you would put inside a valve in your heart or anywhere else in your body, but for our case, it concerned the heart, that will kind of open an artery or a vein that has been clogged or closed by some way. And then it would keep that artery or vein open for blood flow to go through. In our case, we were making a bioresorbable one, so a temporary stent, and this would be made out of a polymer that would slowly dissolve into the body with little to no side effects over a couple months to a couple years, depending on how long that patient needed the stent for. And we ended up choosing a base material of polylactic acid, which interestingly enough can be 3D printed. So we 3D printed all of our stents, and then layering 2 other polymer layers on top of it to make it more compatible with the human body. Our first layer was polydopamine, I believe. No, sorry, our first layer. So it would be polylactic acid, and then it was heparin, which is a anticoagulant, so it would prevent blood clotting where the stent was inserted. And on top of the heparin layer, we put polydopamine, which is a very compatible with the human body sort of polymer. So it would prevent like an immune response, and then it would prevent blood clotting, and then it would slowly dissolve into your body.
Beautiful.
That was our capstone. Yeah.
So reading your bio introduced me to a word. So let's see if I can pronounce it correctly. You study anisotropy. Is that close?
Anisotropy. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That is how materials behave in a mechanically different way, depending on which direction the stress or load is being applied on it.
And in particular, the behavior of anisotropy in space, on parts in space. What can this work contribute to?
My research concerns the 3D printing of polymers in space, not open to space, but like say in a confined environment such as the ISS. And it hasn't been studied very much before, but recent studies have shown that depending on how you print it, it will have different mechanical properties as opposed to a printed on Earth. I'm not sure if there is anisotropy present in space-made 3D printed polymer parts. However, it is present in parts printed on Earth. So you notice, like, depending on how the print is printed, if you stretch it this way, it might be weaker, but if you stretch it this way, it will be stronger.
Nice. And so presumably this is because if you print something in space, you're relying on its mechanical properties, and this is a way to know in advance.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
So Julia, let me turn back to you, because you raised this, and it's fascinating to me, this idea of a conservation impact bond. Can you expand on what that is and what we would hope to accomplish with it?
Absolutely. So we've heard of things like, carbon credits. So the conservation impact bond it's kind of this emerging market of biodiversity credits. That's a really straightforward way of putting it. So the conservation impact bond is this finance tool that's focused on creating healthy landscapes in the Carolinian zone of Canada, and also working in the spirit and practice of reconciliation and traditional Indigenous knowledge. And it's kind of a pay for success model. It's a very new concept. Not a lot of people have heard of this bond. They're still in stages of development. So basically, investors will provide an upfront capital for conservation initiatives, and then you will be paid. These stewards will commit to growing, native plants and practicing these environmentally wise practices that are aligned with traditional knowledge. And like I said, it's a pay for success model. So the success is these, predetermined environmental and social outcomes. And once these goals are achieved, then investors are repaid with the returns. So it's just kind of encouraging people to kind of invest in the environment. And it's a very new concept. It's something not a lot of people have heard of before, because, there's things like offsets to kind of balance out, your environmental impact. But in the case of this bond, not only is it trying to work with restoration and these traditional practices, it's trying to actually leave land in a better condition than how it was found, because the land provides all these ecosystem services for you, which are these benefits, an estimated $33 trillion a year in benefits from nature. So that's what we really just have to focus on, in protecting those benefits. So that's what this bond is kind of designed around.
That's really cool. Is that, would you call that a form of public-private partnership? It's sort of a way of injecting private money into social goods?
Absolutely. It's part of the social enterprise, for sure. Anyone can be a steward for the conservation impact bond. And currently in my TABES trainee experience, I'm actually working with a nonprofit organization, Carolinian Canada Coalition, and they are an ecosystem recovery network, and they kind of work on protecting and restoring and enhancing life in the Carolinian zone. So they're also tied in with this bond. So there's definitely both public and private connections there.
So, Julia, you study biodiversity, circular economy, and climate change finance. Can you expand a little bit on how these subjects are connected?
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of biodiversity, that ties in with these ecosystem services. So nature provides all these benefits. Biodiversity is, diversity of species. So that connects to climate change, because if you're going to have, a healthy habitat, a healthy state that's thriving, it's going to have, increased biodiversity. It's not going to be under those climate change stressors. And then in terms of the circular economy, biodiversity is part of that. It's plants are kind of the ultimate circular economy, if you think about it, because it's it's the resource that just keeps on regenerating.
Beautiful. Thank you. So let's turn to the subject of EDI. These questions are for both of you. What do equity, diversity, and inclusion mean to you as university students?
I'd say, no, you go.
Sorry. I was just gonna say I need a while to like ruminate on this.
Yeah, it's something that's, it's constantly changing. I'd say it's definitely improved over the years, but there's still a lot of work to be done, I'd say. And as a university student, or anyone really, EDI comes down to, accessibility and exposure, because a lot of people may be intimidated by, science or these scientific concepts, which is why things like science communication are so important. Because if you're able to share, these concepts to simpler, in simpler terms, to wider audiences, it makes it more accessible and easier to process, less daunting. And then that kind of allows, kind of opens the gates for diversity, because anyone feels like they could be a part of it.
Angela?
Oh no, sorry. How I always thought of it is it's a way to allow for certain marginalized groups of people who have not had the opportunities or have been set back from achieving opportunities due to their environments of attaining the same sort of abilities and educational prospects as someone who has grown up with a very, very lucky life.
Nice. Thank you both. So again, to both of you, how do you advocate for diversity and inclusion among colleagues who don't understand or disregard its importance?
I don't think I've ever had a colleague who's completely disregarded EDI to me before. I feel like a lot of people are, they're quite scared to voice their opinions on EDI, especially if they're critical. So I find that I don't really have to do. Actually, I will have to think about this, because I've actually never thought about this before. If I do advocate it, I haven't outright advocated it in a very in-your-face way, but perhaps I've done it in more like softer ways.
Can you recall an example?
If I have to, like I said, I haven't really thought about this.
Well, while you're reflecting on that, Julia, do you have any thoughts?
On if my personal experiences with EDI?
Yeah.
Well, it's never really been this kind of outright thing in my experience, but there is, as a kind of woman in STEM, not that I want to, there's kind of this internal fight against imposter syndrome, where no one's telling you you're not good enough to be there, but just historically there's there's like gendered bias in the field. Like I said, it's gotten better now, but there's kind of always this imposter syndrome you're fighting, and that's this road of self-doubt. But you just kind of have to surround yourself with a positive environment, and also just recognize your own value, because at the end of the day, you're the one that knows your own abilities. So yeah, I've never really had those discussions, because like Angela said, a lot of people, if they have a kind of negative opinion, they're not really too vocal about it. It's more so just kind of fighting like a stigma, or trying to recognize your own value and where you fit in as this kind of piece of the puzzle.
Actually, I have thought of someone who has expressed, interrupted you, a negative opinion. I'm not going to say who it was, but it's not really a negative opinion against sort of the philosophy of EDI. It was more against the implementation of EDI. As, for example, if you have to, say, apply for a grant or for a scholarship, oftentimes there is an EDI aspect of it. And this may feel like it is being forced on you, as opposed to incorporating the EDI aspects in the application of such a process in and of itself. You must do a whole essay on how is your research, or whatever you're applying for, or how are you a good advocate or representative for pushing the EDI philosophy. And perhaps this is not a good way to implement it. I mean, it does get people thinking about the subject, but it feels like it is sort of shoved in as an afterthought.
Mm.
And this would be like probably the most recent critical thing I have heard about EDI. And how I responded to that was, well, I actually do agree with this. I feel like in some cases, considering the consideration of EDI is pushed in a rather callous way, sort of like as an afterthought, as opposed to being incorporated in the process, rather than making a whole separate section for EDI, incorporated throughout the process from beginning to end, so that you're always thinking about how is this equitable, how is this diverse, how is this inclusive when you do a project, as opposed to, like I said before a million times, just at the very end.
Thanks, Angela. Julia, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's a really great point about incorporating it along the way. That's something that I've found, at least in my experience, the TAVES program has done really well, because we've taken quite a few different modules, and then we've always got so many different, guest speakers, and then the trainees themselves come from very diverse backgrounds, and also diversity in the subjects that they're studying. So I feel very lucky that there's this really diverse program that really, like Angela said, it doesn't treat that EDI as an afterthought. It's always along the way as you're training.
Thank you. So, what can a university do to ensure that people of all backgrounds are respected and included? If you've pointed out that there are mechanisms that we can do that can feel a little ham-handed, but what would you do if you were to recommend policy or practices?
The current way that, well, I've only been at York for a little bit over a year, and how I see York do it is that at the beginning we had to take EDI classes, right? And they were either taught by a professor or they were online through an official Government of Canada website. I don't know if it was the same for you, Julia, in the biology department.
There was some online within like the e-class setting, and then there's some webinars and seminars, things like that we had to take.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so then more or less the same for us, yeah. I feel like this was actually a good start for the year, especially if you're coming in as a new student, because you sort of get an idea of how York treats this whole EDI issue. But then after that, it kind of like falls off, and that's it. You do your one semester, and then you're sort of done. However, I do like that, at least for our department, they bring in more guest speakers and guest lecturers that we can listen to. I feel like it would be nice to have a more diverse inclusion of guest lecturers, just so that people who are studying the degree and who may not see themselves represented do feel represented and see that there is a future in the career for them. Because I remember having this sort of doubt too when I first started, thinking, why are all my professors male? I haven't had a single female professor. Like, what am I going to do with this degree? But yeah, it would be nice to have sort of like be able to look up to people who are similar to you and have had a same background to you and a same upbringing to you, who have succeeded in the field.
Julia, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of exposure and seeing someone that's like you, it really does have an impact on, just your confidence going forward in that field. Representation of all demographics in the scientific community, it really it only adds to innovation and discovery. Whenever people say, oh, why do we have to do this module, or it's just this one-time thing, it's never bad. It's only ever for good. It's just adding to that discovery. In terms of what could be done on campus, I guess it's a similar experience. You just kind of do a couple of modules, and then sometimes it can become an afterthought if you're not, actively practicing it. I would say that their social media pages they're great as they are, but they could definitely, be improved and have even more diversity. Guest, maybe taking over, like a guest segment, taking over the story, because social media is a very powerful place. You can use it for good or bad, and there's a lot of toxicity sometimes, but there's also a huge audience there. So maybe social media take over different students, just to show this diversity in the student population, and letting them share their experiences in these little short bursts could actually make a huge difference, because that can just catch someone's attention and they'll start to look into it and start changing their own perspectives.
Right. So as you progress through your careers, you will almost certainly find yourselves in positions of authority. Let's imagine you're going to be profs or maybe run your own company or something like that. So how would you make students in your classrooms or members of your teams feel a sense of belonging?
Well, this is tough thinking about the future. I guess the number one thing is to make them feel heard and seen, and not judged for whatever opinions they have, or whatever experience. Just kind of going into it with an open mind, being accepting, and letting them know that there's only ever room for growth, and that there's no judgment, because everyone's been a beginner at some point. So it's just letting them be heard and offering a safe, kind of judgment-free environment.
Angela?
Well, I do TA some classes, and I worked like in a customer service job where we like at a restaurant where we have like sort of regular customers. And I do find that the best way to get someone to feel like they're part of a community, either it's in a class or it's in a restaurant that they love going to, is to just get to know them outside of the professional aspect. You're not here to just teach these students. You want to know, are they stressed out? Like, do they have a lot of midterms going on? What are their hobbies? How many other classes they're taking? As opposed to always focusing on the productivity at hand. You need to take some time to get to know them outside of that. And I feel like that sort of emotional bond is more important to make someone feel part of a group, as opposed to thinking, oh, I'm so effective to this company, or my grades are so good in this class. You won't feel part of a group just based on numbers, You have to have that human relationship.
That's great. Thank you. So Julia, you are in the TABES program, which is Training in Applied Biotechnology for Environmental Sustainability. And Angela, you are in the SMART ART program, which stands for Smart Autonomous Robotic Technology for Space Exploration. These are both very interdisciplinary programs. Julia, I think you touched on this earlier. What are the benefits of diversity when it comes to gathering expertise from different fields?
So it is. Both of these, I'd say, are very interdisciplinary programs. With my experience with TABES, it was a very different experience for me, because I'm coming from a biology background from my undergrad, and TABES, there was a lot of engineering students, which I haven't actually. You don't really come across too many of them in your upper year bio classes. So that alone was a bit of a shift, just that engineering mindset. And then we also took these courses on, one of them was technology commercialization, where we kind of worked together to kind of build up like a business idea, and that kind of brought in this economic perspective. So it's really made research not just a science thing. You kind of got an economic perspective, a scientific perspective, and there's always an ethical perspective there. And yeah, it's that training really gives you these skills these interdisciplinary skills that you wouldn't be able to get somewhere else, because we've had so many things. There's guest speakers. There's these summer courses you take. There's summits that you present at where you meet people from different backgrounds and learn about their experiences. So it's definitely been a very interdisciplinary experience for me.
Angela, what has been your experience with the diversity of different points of view and experience and skills that come into the Smart Art program?
Well, like Julia said, I really enjoyed the summit because I met like so many people from all over Canada who had traveled to York for the Create and the like the whole Create summit. And it was really interesting to see that even in like universities in the middle of Quebec would have such a diverse group of students, which is weird because I've traveled to the middle of Quebec and it's not diverse, but it was quite nice to see. And I really enjoyed seeing how, depending on geographically where the students were from, how their research would reflect that. Like, there was this one woman who had traveled all the way to, I believe it was Nunavut or the Yukon, to do research in the tundra. That was really interesting. And then when it came to more of the students that were in the forested regions of, like I said, from the University in Quebec, they were focused more on ecological research, like how to more trees and improve the yield of various native Ontario plants. I just thought that was really interesting because I didn't really think about how and where you were studying would affect what you research. And then it made me think perhaps maybe at York, because there's like such a big space engineering program, maybe that's why I chose what I chose.
I listened to a podcast once, and this story may be apocryphal, but there was this hotel that was having two conferences at once. One was heart surgeons and the other one was plumbers. And the conversations they had uncovered techniques that might be applicable from one field to the other, because basically they're both plumbing, right? So I'm wondering if, as you meet with people from other disciplines, that there are challenges trying to translate what they do, but there's also opportunities to translate what they do. Have you had a moment where you're like, oh, that's really cool. In fact, we do that, but we call it something completely different, or that could really make an impact here?
So I remember seeing one of the research, the theses or research projects during the summit, and then I forgot her name. I'm so sorry. I'm so bad with names, but she was finding a way to make like biodegradable plant pots to like kind of grow trees in, and then after a certain amount of years, just kind of put them in the ground, and then it would slowly biodegrade over time, and the tree would grow into the ground through that. And I remember thinking that was really interesting because I do that too. But I just use like eggshells, and I just plant them in eggshells, and then they obviously. But that's just for me. And then also the mechanism of her biodegradability was very similar to the stent that I did for the capstone project. Actually, the exact same mechanism. Like, who would have thought?
Yeah, that's really cool. Julia, is there an example that came across your mind there?
Where another discipline crossed over with my own? Or
like you can sort of share a story about when it became fruitful or when it was challenging to sort of, oh, you know what, we're talking a completely different language. You have to overcome that and find a way to work together.
Yeah. So part of that TABES training I did, there was that technology commercialization course, which really challenged me to kind of see things from like an entrepreneurial side, because this course kind of made you see your research and kind of frame it in a way to be, for the marketplace or for industry, as opposed to framing it for like academia or a publication. So kind of getting over that learning curve of learning, user needs and gains and pros and things like that. Just you don't really get too much experience with entrepreneurship in at least like an undergrad STEM program. So that was really interesting because a lot of people wouldn't think that there'd be such a connection, or that it would be too challenging to kind of incorporate that kind of mindset into your own research. But it was really interesting to learn about that and realize, my research actually it can go down one of two ways. It could be, some like these publications, or it could be framed for like a business. It was really interesting to get that kind of businessy side of it.
That's cool. So this is the last question. Thank you both for a terrific conversation. I do appreciate it. What are you most excited about in your studies and research?
There's a lot. I feel like there's so much going on. I'm trying to think.
That's good. That's a good sign.
What's going on?
I was going to say, we're taking so long. We're such bad students. Like, we can't think of anything we're excited about.
No. Do you have anything you're excited about?
Nothing. No, I'm just kidding. A lot of things too. Yeah, I'm trying to like filter them all out.
I can, if you need time, I'll jump in.
Yeah, you could.
Go ahead.
I feel like, you're just like...
just because I'm the most recent thing I can think of. I submitted a poster with my supervisor to this conference, or the IPBES, which is Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. I think it's even longer.
And they fit that all into that one word. That's good.
It's even longer than TABES. Like, it's a very long name. But yeah, IPBES, I submitted a poster, for this IPBES 10th plenary, and it was accepted, by the United Nations to be displayed at that plenary in Bonn, Germany, about the conservation impact bond. So that was really fun, and a little intimidating, but it was a good learning experience, kind of really formatting your research into such a concise one page document that so many people are gonna have their eyes on. So that was definitely something exciting and challenging. And I'm also still completing my internship with the Carolinian Canada Coalition, working on a couple of things with them. Some on the more, data side, and then some science communication modules to just kind of get people interested in their own gardens and healthy landscapes. So that's what's kind of been going on with me right now. That I've been looking forward to, and I've been working through, and then eventually, finishing the thesis. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's a lot to be excited about. Thank you. Angela, what about you?
Mine is more simple. So I'm not sure if I want to continue my graduate studies, and I probably will. But I really look forward to, this is just very short term, like while I'm still in school, I very much look forward to when I actually like get a decent paper out to be able to submit it to a conference and then travel to somewhere nice.
Very nice. Yes.
Of course, to learn things. Yes, to learn new innovation, research, because I want to go to a cool country.
We learn and we disseminate, right? Perfect. Thank you so much. My guests today were Julia Bava and Angela Huang. Thank you both for being on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you for having us. It was a great chat.
Thank you for listening to Inclusive Conversations, Empowering Voices, a program celebrating and promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion. Produced by the NSERC Create Programs, TABES, and Smart Art, in association with the Lassonde School of Engineering at York University.